"Get out of my way, stupid, you're going to dirty my suit." Brandon Miller delivered a sharp kick to the pregnant woman. Sarah fell to her knees, shielding her belly. The white towel slipped onto the marble floor. Brandon's friends laughed as they filmed with their phones. Sarah lifted her gaze with serenity, without tears. She looked him straight in the eyes. "My husband is on his way," she said calmly, like a silent bomb. That composure made Brandon uneasy for the first time. Dozens of guests at the White Swan restaurant watched from a distance. Some whispered angrily, but no one moved to help. Others discreetly pulled out their phones, anticipating the millions of views the video would reach on social media. With a dignity that brutally contrasted with the humiliation she had suffered, Sarah slowly stood up, picked up the towels one by one, and walked away calmly. Her right hand remained on her belly, leaving behind a silence full of questions. No one imagined who the husband of that woman really was, or the secret that would shake the entire Miller family. 3 hours later, the video was circulating on every platform. The Miller family had built its empire over 40 years. Richard Miller, Brandon's father, ran a chain of luxury hotels, shopping centers, and real estate projects across the United States. His fortune was estimated at $200 million, and his political influence reached the highest levels of government. Brandon had grown up in a world of absolute privilege. He had never worked a single day in his life. His only responsibilities consisted of spending family money on sports cars, extravagant trips, and private yacht parties. By the age of 22, he had already been expelled from 3 universities for drug and violence scandals. His younger sister, Emily, at 19, followed a similar pattern. Both treated domestic workers, waiters, and company employees as if they were inferior beings, disposable objects that existed only to serve them. Sarah Johnson had started working at the White Swan restaurant just 2 months earlier, after leaving her job at a veterinary clinic because she could no longer stand for so many hours. She needed the money. Her husband had been away on business, and she had to support the family until his return. At 25, with nursing studies interrupted for lack of resources, she showed a natural beauty that required no expensive makeup or designer clothes. She carried that quiet elegance of someone who has faced adversity without losing kindness. That night, when she arrived at her small apartment, she found her phone flooded with messages. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers sent her screenshots of the viral video. Pregnant woman kicked by millionaire in luxury restaurant. Businessman's son brutally attacks pregnant woman. The arrogance of the rich has no limits. The video had reached 2 million views in just 3 hours. Comments multiplied: outrage, anger, demands for justice. Some users had already identified Brandon Miller and began spreading information about the entire family. Sarah turned off her phone and sat on the bed. She tenderly caressed her belly, feeling the baby's tiny kicks. "Don't worry, my love, everything will be all right," she whispered. But inside she knew the storm was only beginning. Across town, at the Miller mansion, Richard was receiving call after call from image consultants, lawyers, and business partners. The crisis spread like wildfire. The media had already picked up the story, and by morning it would be on every news program in the country. Brandon, oblivious to the scale of the disaster he had caused, slept deeply in his 500-square-meter suite. The sun had not yet risen when Richard Miller's phone began ringing non-stop. "Mr. Miller, we need to talk urgently," said the tense voice of Mark Thompson, Director of Public Relations. "Your son's video already has 8 million views. It's trending worldwide on every platform." Richard sat up in his king-size bed, still unable to grasp the magnitude of the disaster. Through the windows of his penthouse, he looked at the city he had helped build with shopping malls and apartment towers. "What video are you talking about?" he asked. "Turn on the news, sir, any channel." With the remote in hand, he turned on the 75-inch television. The first channel was broadcasting, in slow motion, his son kicking a pregnant woman in the city's most exclusive restaurant. The second channel had 3 commentators analyzing the case as a symbol of social inequality. The third showed spontaneous protests outside the Miller Group's offices. "My God," murmured Richard. His phone would not stop ringing. Partners canceled contracts, investors withdrew funds, top executives resigned over irreconcilable ethical differences. By 7 in the morning, more than 20 administrative employees had quit. The domestic staff did not show up either. The morning news led with the case, featuring interviews with human rights specialists and women's rights advocates. Brandon woke to his father's shouting. "Brandon, get down here immediately." When he reached the study, he found his father pacing like a caged lion. Screens showed graphs of the company's stock collapse. In just 6 hours, they had lost 30% of their market value. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" roared Richard. 40 years of work destroyed in one night. "Dad, it was just an annoying employee. People will forget in a week." Richard stepped closer to his son, and for the first time in 22 years, he shouted at him with full force. "That annoying employee is costing us $50 million. The study door opened, and Mark Thompson entered, accompanied by an older man of about 60, dressed in an impeccable yet modest suit. His mere presence commanded respect. "Mr. Miller, allow me to introduce Mr. Roberts," Thompson said nervously. "He represents the assaulted woman." Mr. Roberts had eyes that seemed to read thoughts. His perfectly combed gray hair and steady gray eyes conveyed relentless intelligence. "Mr. Miller," he said in a calm but firm voice, "I've come to present you with a proposal that may save what remains of your reputation." "How much do you want?" Richard asked directly. "This is not about money. My client is not seeking financial compensation." Brandon let out a sarcastic laugh. "Then what does she want? A public apology? A foundation named after her?" The attorney looked at him as if he were a disgusting insect. "She wants true justice, transformative justice." He opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Your son will work as a volunteer at St. Mary's Hospital for the next 2 months, specifically in the maternity ward, helping low-income pregnant women. No privileges, no excuses, no absences." "That's ridiculous," Brandon shouted. "The alternative," continued Mr. Roberts, unfazed, "is to face a lawsuit for physical assault, intentional injury, psychological damage, and social discrimination. The attorneys have calculated it could amount to $120 million in compensation, plus legal expenses and irreversible damage to your family's image." Richard felt the air leave his lungs. Mr. Roberts added, "My client has set one non-negotiable condition: the community service will end only when her baby is born. Until that moment, your son must strictly fulfill the hospital work." "And if I accept this, is the case closed?" Richard asked. "If your son shows real change and complies with all conditions, my client will consider not pursuing legal action." Brandon looked at the scene as if it were a nightmare. "Dad, you can't be serious." Richard glanced at the screens showing the collapsing stock, street protests, and cancelled contracts. With a broken voice, he said, "I accept." And for the first time in his life, Brandon Miller would have to work. St. Mary's Hospital smelled of disinfectant and human suffering. Brandon arrived on the first day in his brand-new BMW and parked in the space reserved for doctors. Security guards approached immediately. "Young man, that spot is for medical staff only." "I'm medical staff," Brandon lied, showing the letter signed by Mr. Roberts accrediting him as a volunteer. "Volunteers park on the street," the guard replied firmly. First humiliation. Head nurse Nancy Carter was a 50-year-old woman with 3 decades of hospital experience. She had witnessed hundreds of births, comforted mothers who lost their children, and worked 24-hour shifts. She had no patience for rich kids playing at being volunteers. "So, you're the famous Brandon Miller," she said, handing him a faded green uniform. "Here, last names don't matter, only work does." She assigned him the most basic tasks: cleaning floors, changing sheets, serving meals to patients, emptying trash bins. On the first day, Brandon refused to clean a bathroom. "I'm not touching that," he said with disgust. "Then go home," Nancy replied coldly. "But be clear, if you don't fulfill your duties here, tomorrow you'll be standing before a judge facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit." Brandon cleaned the bathroom. His hands, accustomed only to champagne glasses and sports car steering wheels, blistered from the cleaning chemicals. His back ached from constant bending, and his feet swelled after standing for 8 hours a day. The nurses treated him with professional coldness, the doctors ignored him, and the patients watched him with curiosity, some recognizing his face from the news. During the first week, he tried to use his influence to gain privileges. "Do you know who I am?" he asked an intern who asked him to take samples to the lab. "Yes, I know who you are," the intern replied calmly. "You're the volunteer who's going to take these samples to the lab right now." It didn't work. In the second week, he tried to convince his father to end the charade. "Dad, this is inhumane. I'm working like a servant." "You're working like any normal person," Richard replied. "And you'll continue until that woman's baby is born." It was in the third week that Brandon saw Sarah for the first time since the night at the restaurant. She came for a routine prenatal checkup. She wore a simple maternity dress and comfortable shoes. Her hair was tied back in a plain ponytail, and without heavy makeup, she still radiated that natural beauty that needed no adornment. When their eyes met in the hallway, Sarah looked at him with a mix of surprise and curiosity. There was no hatred in her eyes, which unsettled Brandon deeply. "Miss Johnson," a nurse greeted her. "This way, please." Brandon followed her with his gaze as she walked toward the doctor's office, instinctively protecting her belly, the same belly he had endangered with his kick. For the first time, he felt something strange in his chest, an uncomfortable sensation he couldn't identify. In the following days, he began to hear the stories of the patients. Megan, 16, pregnant and abandoned by her boyfriend. Donna, with 4 children, whose husband had emigrated to the United States. Lauren, a single mother who worked 12 hours a day as a housekeeper to cover her pregnancy expenses. Women who fought with dignity, who defended their babies fiercely, and who found strength in adversity. One afternoon, while cleaning the nurse's break area, he found a pair of new latex gloves on his desk. There was no note, but he knew immediately who had left them. Sarah had noticed that his hands were cracking from the cleaning chemicals. That night, Brandon kept thinking about the gesture. No one in his life had ever shown him that kind of consideration. His parents bought him cars, trips, luxuries, but no one had ever noticed his battered hands. The next day, while he was organizing patient files, he saw her in the waiting room. Sarah caressed her belly in circular motions, whispering words he couldn't hear from a distance. Her face glowed with that special light of expectant mothers as they spoke to the baby inside them. For the first time in his life, Brandon Miller felt true guilt. And for the first time, he wondered what kind of person he had been until that moment. The meeting was called in Richard Miller's main office, on the 42nd floor of the tallest corporate building in the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view that could make anyone feel like the owner of the world. But that afternoon, Richard did not feel powerful. Mr. Roberts arrived accompanied by Sarah, who, 8 months pregnant, walked with the serenity of women in the final stage of pregnancy. She wore a simple navy blue dress that emphasized her quiet dignity against the ostentation of the place. "Mr. Miller," Roberts began, "the time has come to reveal the whole truth." "What truth?" Richard frowned. "I thought this matter was only about the lawsuit." "It's about something much deeper," Roberts replied, opening his briefcase. He laid several photographs and documents on the Italian marble table. The first showed a man of about 45, dressed in a military uniform. He had the same gray eyes as Richard and the same strong facial structure, but in his expression there was a nobility Richard had lost decades earlier. "Richard, let me officially introduce you to your sister-in-law, Sarah Johnson Miller." Silence fell on the office like an avalanche. "Sarah is married to your older brother, Michael Miller, the same brother who broke ties with you 15 years ago because of the way you treated employees and workers." Richard felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Michael is dead," he murmured. "He died on a military mission overseas," he stammered. "Michael is alive," Sarah interrupted firmly. "He was on classified missions for 12 years. We couldn't contact the family for reasons of national security." Mr. Roberts continued placing documents on the table. "A year ago, Michael retired from the army with honors. He married Sarah 8 months ago. When they decided to come back and reconnect with the family, Michael learned about the restaurant incident." Richard picked up one of the photographs. It showed Michael and Sarah on their wedding day, surrounded by fellow soldiers in an intimate celebration. "Why didn't he contact me directly?" Richard asked, his voice breaking. "Because he wanted to see what kind of people you had become," Sarah replied. "Michael asked me to work at the restaurant for a few weeks to observe how the Miller family treated humble people." The revelation fell like a hammer. "It was all a test," Sarah added. "Michael wanted to see if there was still a possibility of family reconciliation." Richard collapsed into his executive chair. "And my son kicked you. Your son attacked his uncle's pregnant wife, his future cousin, the woman his brother loves more than his own life." At that moment, the office door opened. A man Richard had not seen in 15 years walked in, but he recognized him immediately. Michael Miller was 45, but still in excellent physical shape. His military bearing was evident in every movement, though his eyes carried a wisdom and kindness Richard envied. "Hello, brother," Michael said calmly. Richard stood slowly. The two looked at each other for long seconds, reading in the other's face the passage of time and the choices that had separated them. "Michael, I thought you were dead." For you, I was dead, he replied. From the day I saw how you treated Mary, the housekeeper who worked in our parents' home for 20 years. Do you remember? You fired her without pension or severance when she got cancer. Richard closed his eyes. That memory had haunted him for years. That was a mistake, he stammered. No, it was a decision that showed who you really were, Michael countered. That's why I left, why I cut all contact. He moved closer to Sarah and placed a protective hand over her belly. When Sarah told me what happened at the restaurant, my first impulse was to come here and confront your son like you confront cowards who attack pregnant women. Richard swallowed hard. But my wife convinced me to give him a chance, to see if there was anything worth saving in him. Michael walked over to the window, gazing at the city. These past weeks, I've been keeping track of Brandon at the hospital. I get reports every day. You've been watching him? Richard asked in astonishment. I have contacts everywhere. I know that at first he resisted, that he tried to use his influence, that he complained and protested. He paused without taking his eyes off the street. But I also know that yesterday he helped a teenage mother fill out hospital forms. I know that 3 days ago he stayed late cleaning after an emergency. And I know that he has started treating the nurses with respect. He turned back to Richard. My nephew is changing. The question is, will it be real change or just an act to get out of trouble? With the graceful poise of a pregnant woman, Sarah stood up. That's why we want to make one final test, she said. In 2 weeks, our baby will be born. We want Brandon to be present at the birth, to see the life he put at risk, to truly understand the magnitude of what he did, Michael added. After that, we'll decide if there's any possibility of family reconciliation. Richard looked at his older brother with a mixture of admiration and shame. And if Brandon doesn't really change? Michael gathered the photographs from the table. Then I'll know the Miller family has no redemption, and we'll leave forever. When they left the office, Richard remained alone before the massive windows, gazing at the city he had helped build with money but without heart. For the first time in decades, he felt a real fear, the fear of losing something money couldn't buy, the possibility of regaining his brother. Brandon's 6th week at the hospital began differently. He arrived early, even before the morning shift nurses. His hands, now calloused from work, carefully prepared the supplies for the day. He no longer complained about the faded uniform or the smell of disinfectant that had become familiar. That morning, an emergency arrived, an 18-year-old girl in premature labor. Her name was Jessica, and she had come alone, terrified and crying. I have no way to pay, she repeated between sobs. My boyfriend abandoned me when he found out about the pregnancy, and my family threw me out of the house. Dr. Stevens, a 50-year-old man known for his bad temper, approached impatiently. If you can't pay, go to the public hospital. We don't do charity here. Brandon watched the scene from the hallway. Something inside him snapped like a spring. He stepped forward decisively. I'll cover Jessica's expenses. The doctor looked at him in surprise. You? A volunteer is going to pay for a stranger's care? Yes, Brandon replied without hesitation. And if you have a problem with that, take it up with hospital administration. It was the first time he had used his family influence to help someone, not to benefit himself. Jessica looked at him with tearful gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just focus on having a healthy baby. For the next several hours, Brandon stayed by her side. He held her hand when contractions intensified, brought her water when she was thirsty, and spoke encouraging words when fear overwhelmed her. When the baby was born, healthy and strong, weighing just over 6 pounds, Brandon felt an emotion he had never known. Seeing that tiny life he had helped protect filled him with a satisfaction deeper than any sports car or luxury trip. What are you going to name him? He asked as Jessica cradled the newborn. Daniel, she replied. Like the angel who helped me when I needed it most. Brandon left the room with wet eyes. In the hallway, he met head nurse Nancy Carter, who had treated him harshly at the beginning. You did something good today, kid, she said with a smile she had never shown before. That baby has a chance to live thanks to you. I only did what any decent person would do. No, Brandon, not just anyone. In my 30 years here, I've seen plenty of wealthy people who never lifted a finger to help anyone. That afternoon, while organizing patient files, Sarah arrived for her last checkup before delivery. Her belly was full term, and she walked with the slowness of the final weeks of pregnancy. When she passed Brandon's desk, she stopped. I heard what you did for Jessica today, she said quietly. Brandon looked up, expecting sarcasm or distrust. Instead, he found something like approval. She needed help. Yes, she did, and you gave it to her without expecting anything in return. Sarah stood beside him, caressing her belly in circular motions. I want you to know something, Brandon. I've been watching you these weeks. At first, I thought it was just an act. But I've seen how you treat the patients, how you stay past your shift during emergencies, how you look at newborns as if for the first time you understand what life means. Brandon felt a lump in his throat. Sarah, what I did to you that night? I can't forgive what you did, she interrupted firmly. That kick could have killed my baby. It could have killed me. Silence stretched between them like an abyss. But I can trust what you're beginning to do, she continued. And that's more important than forgiveness. She walked toward the doctor's office, leaving Brandon with her words echoing in his mind. 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, the hospital's emergency alarm sounded. Sarah had gone into labor. Brandon was finishing his night shift when he saw Michael running through the halls, carrying his wife in his arms. The ex-soldier's face showed the concern of a man who had faced enemy fire but never something as terrifying as watching the woman he loved suffer. Where's the doctor? Michael shouted. My wife is bleeding. The on-call doctor appeared immediately, followed by a team of nurses. Brandon watched from a distance, feeling useless but unable to walk away. It's a minor complication, the doctor explained after examining Sarah. The baby is in the wrong position, but we can handle it. We need to prepare her for emergency surgery. For the next 2 hours, Michael paced the hallways like a caged lion. His trembling hands were the only sign of his terror. Brandon approached after seeing him suffer in silence. Sir, uncle, he corrected himself, may I stay with you? Michael looked at him in surprise. You don't have to do this, Brandon. Yes, I have to do it. I put that woman and her baby in danger once. I need to be here until I know they're safe. Both of them sat down on the uncomfortable plastic chairs in the waiting room. The silence between them carried 15 years of distance and 6 weeks of transformation. When you were a boy, Michael said suddenly, you used to follow me everywhere. You said you wanted to be a soldier like me. Brandon smiled sadly. I remember. Do you know why I really distanced myself from the family? Brandon shook his head. Because I saw what money was doing to all of you. I saw how your father treated employees like objects, how your mother spoke with contempt about the poor, how you and Emily grew up believing you were superior just because you were born into privilege. Michael leaned his elbows on his knees. In the army, I learned that a person's worth is not measured by what they have but by what they're willing to sacrifice for others. Just as I sacrificed my family relationship for my principles, you're sacrificing your comfort now to serve women you once despised. At that moment, the doctor came out with his mask hanging from his neck. Mr. Miller, you have a beautiful, healthy son. Your wife is perfectly fine. Michael collapsed into the chair, releasing a deep sigh. May I see them? Of course. They're in room 304. As they walked there, Michael stopped. Brandon, I want you to meet your cousin. They entered the room together, where Sarah, exhausted but radiant with the glow of new motherhood, held a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Michael, she whispered, look at him. He's beautiful. He kissed her forehead with a tenderness that gave Brandon a pang of envy. He had never witnessed such pure, protective love. What will we call him? Michael asked. Samuel, Sarah answered. Like the archangel who protects families. Brandon stood at the door, watching. That baby who now slept peacefully had once been in danger because of him. That woman who radiated happiness had once endured terror because of his arrogance. Brandon, Sarah called, come closer. He stepped forward slowly, as if walking on sacred ground. Do you want to hold him? I don't know if I should. I want you to, she insisted. I want you to feel the weight of the life you've helped protect these past weeks. With trembling hands, Brandon held Samuel in his arms. The child was so small, so fragile, and at the same time so perfect. His tiny fingers closed around Brandon's index finger. In that instant, something broke inside him. All the arrogance and coldness accumulated over 22 years collapsed like sandcastles. He began to cry. It wasn't the spoiled cry of a rich kid, but the deep weeping of a man who finally understood the magnitude of his mistakes and the beauty of redemption. I'm sorry, he whispered, looking at the baby, at Sarah, and at Michael. I'm so sorry. We know, Michael replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. And now that you truly feel it, we can start being a family again. Outside, the dawn painted the sky with golden hues, as if the world itself celebrated Samuel's birth and Brandon's rebirth. 5 years later, the garden of the Miller family home had changed completely. Where there had once been ostentatious marble statues, fruit trees grew for neighborhood children. Where there had once been untouchable grass, there was now a playground where Samuel and other kids played every afternoon. At 27, Brandon gently pushed the swing where his cousin laughed with the pure joy of childhood. The boy had inherited the family's gray eyes but carried the kindness of his mother's smile. "Uncle Brandon, will you tell me the story of when you worked at the hospital again?" "Again? I've told you 1,000 times. But I like it, especially the part where you helped deliver Jessica's baby." Brandon smiled. Jessica and her son Daniel, now also 5 years old, had become part of the family. The boy attended the private school the Millers had transformed into an institution offering full scholarships to children from humble families. "All right, but afterward you'll help me prepare dinner." From the terrace, Sarah watched the scene while caressing her belly. She was pregnant again and expecting a girl who would be named Hope. This time, Brandon had been the first to volunteer to help with whatever was needed during the pregnancy. Michael came up behind her and embraced her, placing his hands over hers. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange life is," she replied. 5 years ago, I never would have imagined having such a beautiful family, or that my brother would become the man he is now." Richard Miller had retired early after his son's transformation. He no longer ran the empire with an iron hand. Instead, he had created a foundation that provided decent jobs and health insurance for single mothers. He spent his days teaching Samuel to fish in the small garden pond. Emily, Brandon's younger sister, had also changed. She now directed a shelter for vulnerable pregnant women, inspired by her brother's transformation. "Dad, can I stay for dinner?" Brandon asked, walking up with Samuel at his side. "This is your home, son. You can always stay." But they both knew Brandon lived in his own apartment, near the hospital where he worked as volunteer coordinator. He had completed his nursing studies and specialized in neonatal care, guiding other privileged young people to discover the value of community service. As they prepared dinner together, Samuel spoke animatedly about his day at kindergarten. He had his mother's gift for making friends and his father's quiet determination. "Uncle Brandon, is it true you used to be bad?" he suddenly asked, with the brutal honesty of children. Brandon set down the knife and bent down to Samuel's height. "Yes, Samuel, I used to be very bad. I heard your mom when she was pregnant with you. But you're not bad anymore? I try to be good every day. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, but you help me remember why it's worth trying." Samuel looked at him seriously. "Mom says people can change if they really want to. Your mom is very wise. And she says I changed because I learned how to love." Brandon felt a lump in his throat. Even after 5 years, Samuel's words could still move him to tears. "You love me, Uncle Brandon." "I love you more than my own life, Samuel." "Then that's why you're good now." Dinner passed with laughter, stories from work, and plans for the weekend. Michael told tales from his days in the army, adapted for young ears. Sarah spoke about the progress at the shelter. Richard listened attentively, adding something only when he had something useful to say. When it was time to put Samuel to bed, the whole family joined in the ritual. Brandon read him a story, Michael sang him a military lullaby, Sarah kissed him goodnight, and Richard promised to take him fishing the next day. "Good night, family," Samuel whispered before closing his eyes. While the adults shared coffee on the terrace, Brandon looked up at the sky. 5 years earlier, he had never noticed the stars, too busy staring at himself. "You know what's the strangest thing about all this?" he asked Michael. "What?" "That I'm happier now working at the hospital and living on my salary than I ever was with unlimited credit cards and sports cars." "That's because now you understand the difference between price and value." "And what's the difference?" Michael pointed toward the window where Samuel slept peacefully. "Price is what you pay. Value is what you receive in return. That child has no price, his value is infinite." Brandon nodded, understanding. Like forgiveness, like true love, like second chances. That night, as he drove slowly to his apartment, he saw a pregnant young woman struggling to walk at a red light. Without hesitation, he got out of the car. "Excuse me, miss, do you need help?" The woman looked at him with suspicion, but something in Brandon's eyes reassured her. "I'm looking for St. Mary's Hospital. They told me they handle emergencies even if you don't have money. I work there. I can take you. Please, get in, I'll drive you right away." On the way, he thought about all the times he had walked past people in need without seeing them. He thought about the night he had attacked Sarah, and how that terrible act had triggered the most important transformation of his life. He thought of Samuel sleeping in his bed, Sarah expecting their second daughter, Michael, who had had the wisdom to offer redemption instead of revenge. He thought of Jessica and Daniel, of the dozens of mothers he had accompanied over the past 5 years, of the babies he had seen born. When they arrived at the hospital, he helped the woman register and made sure she received immediate care. Returning to his car, he found a note tucked under the windshield wiper. "Thank you for proving that there are still angels on earth. Lisa Brown." Brandon kept the note in his wallet, next to the first photo of him holding newborn Samuel. That night, before sleeping, he wrote in the journal he had started after his transformation. "Dear future me, today Samuel asked me if I used to be bad. I told him the truth, but I also realized something. I wasn't truly bad, I was lost. I confused privilege with superiority, power with strength, price with value. Now I know that real strength lies in protecting the vulnerable, that true wealth lies in the love you give and receive, that true greatness lies in serving others. Tomorrow will be another day to be better, another day to honor the second chance I was given, another day to prove that people can change if they truly want to. Samuel is right, I changed because I learned how to love. And with every passing day, I love even more. Good night, world. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to be reborn." In the silence of the night, somewhere in the city, a pregnant woman slept peacefully in a hospital bed, knowing she had found help at the very moment she needed it most. In a home that had learned how to be a family, a 5-year-old boy dreamed of stories of redemption and second chances. And in the heart of a man who had discovered the value of humility, grew the certainty that some mistakes can be paid with money, but others can only be healed with forgiveness and love. This story has come to an end, but your own story of transformation may just be beginning. Have you ever lived through an experience of forgiveness that changed your life? Do you know someone who found their best self after making a big mistake? Have you witnessed how true love can transform even the most lost souls? We all have moments when we can choose to be like the Brandon at the restaurant or like the Brandon at the hospital. Moments when we must decide between arrogance and humility, between contempt and compassion, between hurting and healing. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that it's never too late to change, if it inspired you to be kinder to those going through hardship, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that heal the soul and remind us of the beauty of humanity. Every week we share stories of transformation, forgiveness, and second chances. And please, leave us a comment telling us from which country you are watching. We love knowing that these stories travel around the world, uniting hearts and reminding us that no matter the language or culture, we all share the same capacity to love, to forgive, and to transform ourselves. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank, what matters is how much love we carry in our hearts and how much good we are capable of doing. Until the next story. May your day be filled with blessings and opportunities to become the best version of yourself.